Angela Renda always said she had no interest in getting married. As a reservations agent at Pan American World Airways in the early 1980s, Angela had the world at her fingertips. She told friends she didn't want to be tied down. "I was able to see the world, go all over, do what I wanted to do," Angela tells CNN Travel Today. Most of her close friends were married with kids. And while Angela, who was 30, loved spending time with her friends' families, she wasn't convinced marriage and children was her path. While Pan Am in the year 1983 didn't quite have the reputation for glamour it had held in previous decades, the airline still represented aspiration and adventure. And not only did Pan Am employees get to enjoy heavily discounted air travel, they were also given buddy passes, allowing them to take a friend or family member on board with them for next to nothing. Angela and her best friend had talked for years about taking advantage of this scheme and heading to Japan together. But when 1983 rolled around, and the two women still hadn't managed to make the trip happen, they started reconsidering their destination. Angela's friend had 2 young children, including a baby, and she was hesitant about traveling so far. So the two friends went back to the drawing board and eventually settled on London as their destination of choice, boarding the Pan American flight in October 1983. Angela loved visiting the UK capital and had explored the city several times before. For Angela's best friend, London was all brand new. She wanted to hit all the tourist spots, including luxury department store Harrods, with its imposing exterior, swanky reputation and vast miles of shopping floor. When Angela's friend made the suggestion, Angela rolled her eyes. It was their final day in London. Harrods' interior is something of a maze, and Angela thought they could easily lose a whole day of the vacation to navigating the many floors and staircases. "It's going to be so crowded in there," said Angela to her friend. "I'll make a deal with you. We're only going to the first floor." Her friend agreed. The first floor, what Londoners would call the ground floor, had plenty to offer. There was the opulent food hall, filled with fine delicacies and foodie treats, and there were children's toys, which was appealing given Angela's friend had 2 young kids. Angela and her friend entered the store via a large wooden door adorned in gold leaf. They wandered around, and then found themselves at another doorway, number 8, where a Harrods employee was standing holding a stack of magic drawing boards. Angela and her friend watched the man demonstrate the boards in action. At first, they were just being polite. Before long, Angela's friend was won over by the concept of the toy. Meanwhile, Angela found herself focusing more on the man holding the board than the board itself. "My girlfriend bought a board for her older child. When she went to pay, I just stood there and waited," recalls Angela. With one sale successfully completed, the magic eraser man turned to Angela and asked if she wanted to buy one too. "No, I don't want one," said Angela firmly, in her New York accent. "Oh, you're an American," he said. That was his opening line, recalls Angela today. "So me, being the American, I'm like, how could you tell?" The two strangers started talking and the magic eraser board man introduced himself as Dave Bertenshaw. One night in London. Harrods department store in London photographed in the 1980s. Harrods department store in London photographed in the 1980s. Jeffrey White/ANL/Shutterstock. Dave didn't usually work in Harrods, he actually headed up the warehouse for the company who made the boards, which were sold at department stores across London. But the night before, Dave's boss had phoned him to ask if he could work the next day's Harrods shift to replace someone who couldn't make it. So, unexpectedly, Dave found himself at Harrods doorway number 8, magic eraser boards in hand. "And that's how I ended up meeting Angela," Dave tells CNN Travel. That day in 1983, Dave was caught between an awareness that time spent with Angela, who'd made it clear she wasn't going to buy a magic eraser board, was detracting from other potential sales, and an overwhelming desire to continue chatting with this intriguing American woman. She was just so, I don't know, different in the sense that she was so over the top, and you felt like you could talk to her, Dave says. "She's just got that face where people say, oh, I can tell her all my troubles. And I wasn't kind of used to that. I thought she might be somebody nice to know. That was my first impression." Dave asked Angela what her plans were later that evening. "Maybe I could show you around London tonight," he ventured. A view across the River Thames of Tower Bridge, London, circa 1970. Photo by Archive Photos/Getty Images. Dave suggested he could show Angela around London the first night they met. Archive Photo Getty Images. "If we're going to do anything, my girlfriend's coming with me, because we're traveling together," Angela replied firmly. She found Dave easy and interesting to speak to, but she was also wary of going off alone with a strange man. Dave said Angela's friend was more than welcome. He suggested the group meet at what was then called the Russell Hotel and is now called the Kimpton Fitzroy. That evening Angela and her friend arrived first. The 19th century hotel was ritzy, sumptuous and a London institution. When Dave arrived, Angela peered at him curiously. As he was walking in, it was funny, because I said to my girlfriend, I think that's him. But I only saw him for a minute earlier, I don't even really know what he looks like. Later, they said their goodbyes and Dave suggested they could meet again, but Angela explained it was her last day in London. I'd drive you to the airport, but I'm taking my nephew to watch the Arsenal match tomorrow, Dave said, adding that Arsenal was his favorite soccer team. I'm thinking this is a little 6-7-year-old nephew. Turns out he's like 8 years younger than Dave is. So Dave was 31. And the guy was 23, says Angela, laughing. I'm like, that's who you're dumping me for? This was the first time Angela realized that when Dave said he was a soccer fan, he really meant it. Dave's entire social life revolved around Arsenal games. Plus, his parents had both passed away, so he valued time spent with the family members he had left. Undeterred by the soccer blow-off, Angela told Dave she'd look him up on her next trip to the UK. They exchanged contact details. She was a Pan Am flight attendant, he was a pilot. Their in-flight meeting sparked a 50-year romance. Long-distance courtship. Angela was able to travel to London frequently thanks to heavily discounted Pan Am employee tickets. Angela was able to travel to London frequently thanks to heavily discounted Pan Am employee tickets. Leber Ullsteinbild, Getty Images. A few months later, in January 1984, Angela returned to London, this time with a different friend in tow. Once she landed in the city, she rang Dave's landline. We agreed to go out to dinner and the three of us went out and had a wonderful time, Angela recalls. I went back again, a month later, and again, saw him. I soon became a London commuter, since I could travel for $12 round trip. Over these subsequent visits, Angela and Dave grew closer. Angela suspected she was falling for Dave, but she also remained wary. For the first, I'd say 6 or 8 dates, I always brought somebody from New York with me, one of the people that I worked with, so I didn't have to be alone with him, in case he was like Jack the Ripper or something and I was falling into a trap, says Angela, only half joking. It was an expensive time for me. Because I wasn't only dating Angie, I was dating the friends as well, the chaperones, says Dave. But that was fine because she had the sense of humor that I liked. The typical New York cut and thrust of banter which has remained to this day. So I enjoyed that part, the back and forth, a lot. Not only was Angela feeling terrible, she was also clueless about how English hospitals worked and felt a rising anxiety as soon as she stepped inside the accident and emergency department. But Dave stayed with her the whole time, translating the UK terms when necessary and comforting her throughout. From there, I had to go back to the hotel and I was on bed rest. He took me back to the hotel. He stayed the entire night sitting in a chair, recalls Angela. That was when I thought, this guy is a real keeper. In between Angela's London visits, Dave and Angela sent each other letters across the Atlantic. As soon as I got on the airplane to go home, I would write to him on the plane, recalls Angela. And then I would mail that when I got home, and then when I got home in between I wrote another letter. And we'd call once a week. Before, it was, I'm going over, it's a lark, I'm having a good time, going to see things. But then after a while it was, I can just go there and just do nothing. And I'll still be happy. But I'd rather be there instead of here, says Angela. I just felt like I was missing him a lot. This was a gradual realization, cemented when Angela opted to travel to Paris with friends one weekend, rather than heading to the UK. I was like, this just isn't the same. I want to be back in London, she says, calling this feeling the missing factor. Dave missed Angela too. He says it was the talking factor that, for him, confirmed he wanted to make things with Angela work long term. I was on my own at the time, he says. You know, just working and going to watch Arsenal basically. On her next visit to London, Angela took her parents with her to meet Dave. The visit was a great success. I got on well with her parents straight away, says Dave.